I was fortunate to meet and work with Larry Billow at FAA headquarters, Washington, D.C., 1985 to 1986. I sat two desks away from Larry in the International Procedures Branch. Larry was 65 years old. I was 35. He became a colleague, mentor, and friend. A coworker told me that Larry had been a B 17 pilot in World War II. Larry had never mentioned that to me. One day I asked Larry, "What was your best memory of service as a B 17 pilot?" Larry answered, "Operation Chowhound, when our B 17 crews delivered food to citizens in Holland." In 2025, I saw a movie about Operation Chowhound and learned the significance of those B 17 missions. You will see the movie later and better understand Larry's answer. And you will see in the movie this caption that reads, "As many men of the mighty Eighth who flew the Chowhound missions reflected, this was the best mission we ever flew and never got credit for." Deborah Billow Krajek, Larry's niece, tells a powerful story of love that leads into the Operation Chowhound movie. Coupled together, the two stories are moving and well up emotions in me every time I watch them. My name is Jack Overfield. This is a picture of me in 1985. Here I am with my loving wife, 40 years later, grateful to tell some of the Larry Billow story. Larry's U.S. military records were destroyed in a National Personnel Records Center fire on July 12, 1973. With help from the following four fine people, an amazing account of Larry Billow's World War II military service exists. Number one, Darren Jelly, researcher and archivist for the 493rd Bomb Group Association and the 493rd Bomb Group Museum, Devonshire, England, home of the Fighting 493rd. Number two, David Schmidt, historian for the 493rd Bomb Group. His dad, Lieutenant Donald J. Schmidt, was a co-pilot with the 493rd Bomb Group at Devonshire, England, from November 1944 through April 1945. Number three, Sandra J. Billow Macklem, Larry's daughter, and her 137-page document about her father's war as a B 17 pilot that she gained through conversations and note taking with her father. She also received from Mr. Jelly and Mr. Schmidt detailed records of Lieutenant Billow's missions while at Devonshire, England. And number four, from Bill Peterson's 259-page document about his dad, Lieutenant George J. Peterson's outstanding record as a co-pilot with the 493rd Bomb Group. The document included accounts from Bill's father and some from Lieutenant Billow. Lieutenant Peterson and Lieutenant Billow flew together in some 25 missions. Now for Larry Billow's military service. On December 2nd, 1942, Larry Billow entered the Army at Camp Perry, Toledo, Ohio. He had already applied for the United States Army Air Force's Aviation Cadet Program. 12 days later, he began Army basic training at Camp Van Dorn, Centerville, Mississippi. Larry was with the 393rd Infantry Regiment, 99th Infantry Division. After basic training, Larry entered a 16 weeks advanced Army training course, radio section. Records indicate Larry entered the Army as a private. In 7 months, he promoted to Technical Corporal T5. How was that possible? Google AI Overview responded with the following. A U.S. Army enlistee in 1943 could rise from private to technician 5th grade T5, equivalent to a corporal, in 7 months by demonstrating exceptional skill in a technical or administrative role, as promotions were based on merit and a specific job need, not just time in service. This rapid advancement required excelling in their assigned military occupational specialty, MOS, possibly through on-the-job training or a specialized course, and receiving recommendations from superiors. Immediately after completing advanced Army training, Larry was selected for and entered the Army Air Force's Aviation Cadet Training Program and began 17 months of pilot training. It is important to note that 17 months later, in December 1944, Larry's former 393rd Infantry Regiment fought courageously in the Battle of the Bulge, particularly in the early stages. They suffered significant casualties. Sandra, Larry's daughter, wrote, I always thought that Dad had served only in the Air Force during World War II. So the fact that he had served in the infantry for a while before starting his pilot training was a surprise to me. It is interesting to speculate what might have happened if the transfer to the Air Force cadet program had not come through. Larry was a B 17 pilot for the 493rd Bomb Group, 860th Bomb Squadron, Debbish Field, England, from December 28, 1944 until June 28, 1945. Here is the outstanding crew at Debbish Airfield, Suffolk, England, 1945. Starting on the top row from left to right, Second Lieutenant Ernie LaRose, Lieutenant Larry Billow, Lieutenant George Peterson, Flight Officer Virgil DeMassimo, and on the bottom left to right, we have Tech Sergeant George Eastland, Tech Sergeant Walter Derdula, Staff Sergeant Francis Kostick, Staff Sergeant Lauren Hayes, and Staff Sergeant Bill Armstrong. They are an outstanding crew, patriots, every one. Let's talk a little bit about practice flights. In England, between January 15, 1945 and May 29, 1945, Larry and crew flew 41 practice flights. They occurred on days with no combat missions or special missions scheduled. These were flight exercises in friendly airspace to keep crew members proficient and prepared for combat missions. Practice flights could be as few as an hour or two to as many as 8 to 9 hours. Most were in the 3 to 6 hours range. Some of these practice flights were called camera bombing. Here's an AI overview of camera bombing. The hand will point to the parts I'm going to read. We'll start at the first paragraph. Camera bombing, often referred to as using a strike camera, was a critical training technique used by B 17 crews in England to practice high altitude, daylight precision bombing without wasting live explosives. It meant using a specialized, often automatic camera mounted in the plane to capture the exact moment of simulated bomb release, allowing instructors to analyze the accuracy of the bombardier and the effectiveness of the Norden bomb sight. Training and evaluation, the resulting photographs were developed and analyzed to see where the bombs would have hit. This allowed for training in formation flying, tracking targets, and improving bombing accuracy, key to the 8th Air Force's doctrine of daylight precision bombing. Larry had 9 training sessions in a linked flight simulator at Debbish Airfield, routinely an hour long. Lieutenant Larry Billow and crew briefed to fly 24 combat missions and 5 special missions. 22 combat missions reached and bombed targets. 2 combat missions scrubbed due to weather, 2 humanitarian missions reached Holland to airdrop food for the Dutch, 1 humanitarian mission to Holland was scrubbed due to weather, and 2 humanitarian missions returned French from German POW camps back to France. Lieutenant Larry Billow piloted 14 different B-17s in 27 missions. Here are 6 of those B-17s. All aircraft shown are actual photos of the aircraft named, except the last aircraft pictured with returning French POWs is not Gainsborough Gal. The same photo of leading lady is used for 6 of the 11 missions described. All videos of the aircraft in flight are AI generated using the real photos. February 3, 1945 was Lieutenant Billow's first combat mission. He was co-pilot on this B-17 Nancy Lee. Road, rail, and communication facilities were bombed over Berlin by 38 B-17s. Flak over the target was moderate and fairly accurate. Pilot Lieutenant Larry Billow and crew flew this aircraft, Jolly Roger III, over Germany on February 22, 1945, along with 27 other B-17s. Each aircraft dropped 3 tons of bombs on communication and transportation facilities. Pilot Lieutenant Larry Billow and crew flew this aircraft, one more time, on February 25, 1945, along with 26 other B-17s. They attacked railroad yards in Munich. Flak over the target was moderate and fairly accurate. Lieutenant Larry Billow and crew flew Badland Butch II on March 17, 1945, along with 29 other B-17s. A total of 84 tons of bombs were dropped on an oil refinery. The low squadron, including Badland Butch, led the formation, followed by the lead squadron and high squadron. Lieutenant Larry Billow 6 times piloted B-17 Leading Lady, tail number 46917. See the red arrow? That is the aircraft Leading Lady. On March 31, 1945, the crew flew this aircraft over Brandenburg to attack factories. Out of the 30 B-17s, 29 dropped a total of 172 1,000-pound bombs with good results. On April 10, 1945, the crew flew Leading Lady over Germany to attack a German Air Force base. Out of the 30 B-17s, 29 each dropped 24 250-pound bombs with very good results. On April 11, 1945, the Billow crew flew Leading Lady over Germany to attack large railway yards. 30 B-17s each dropped 6 1,000-pound bombs with very good results. On April 14, 1945, the Billow crew flew Leading Lady over France to attack German gun and troop emplacements. Out of the 31 B-17s, 29 each dropped 12 500-pound bombs with excellent results. On May 3rd and 5th, 1945, Lieutenant Billow and crew flew Leading Lady to Holland to airdrop food to starving Dutch people. It was a humanitarian mission named Operation Chowhound. Each day, 39 B-17s of the 493rd Bomb Group delivered the life-saving food drops. On May 20th, 1945, the Billow crew flew Gainsborough Gal to Austria in Operation Revival Mission to return French prisoners of war to France. 20 B-17s brought home a total 568 French prisoners. Going home, Lieutenant Larry Billow, crew, and 5 additional 493rd Bomb Group personnel departed Debich Field, Suffolk, England on June 28, 1945, and arrived Army Air Base Bradley Field, Connecticut on July 4, 1945. In total, 13 B-17s departed Debish on June 28th. Leading Lady was one of the 13 aircraft. Larry may have piloted her on this, his last flight. The first leg of the trip home was from Debish Field, England to Royal Air Force, Prestwick, Scotland, 441 miles. The second leg of the flight home was from Royal Air Force, Prestwick, Scotland to Meeksfield, Iceland, 855 miles. The third leg of the flight home was from Meeksfield, Iceland to Newfoundland Airport, Canada, 1,573 miles. The fourth and final leg of the flight home was from Newfoundland Airport, Canada to Army Air Base Bradley Field, Connecticut, 1,034 miles, and they landed on July 4th, 1945. Lieutenant Larry Billow was relieved from active duty on November 2nd, 1945, at the Army Air Force's Separation Center at Bearfield, Fort Wayne, Indiana. Lieutenant Larry Billow received the Army Air Corps Air Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters. Lieutenant Larry Billow also received the European, African, and Middle Eastern Campaign Medal. Lieutenant Larry Billow also was awarded the Honorable Discharge lapel pin. It was an emblem that was given to personnel honorably discharged during World War II. This gold lapel button was a symbol of honest and faithful service and allowed wearers to continue wearing their uniform for a short time after discharge, and was also worn on civilian clothes to show their veteran status.
Hi, my name is Deborah Billow Krajek, and Lawrence Billow was my uncle. I am one of many of his nieces and nephews, and I am lucky enough to have been asked to tell a short story about my Uncle Larry that was told to me by my father years ago. Growing up, I didn't know my Uncle Larry very much at all. He was the oldest child and had grown up and joined the service and was in the military and in the war, while my father was a teenager, a young teenager. And he told me, my father told me a story one time after Uncle Larry had passed away that I thought was very touching. You need to understand that the Billow family were very loving people, very good Christian family, but they were of German heritage and they were not demonstrative. I remember family reunions where people would just sit and talk around the weather and you may get a hug, but people didn't really share a lot of the hard stuff, the tough stuff. And it wasn't until I was an adult, and I'm sure most of my cousins were adults, that we heard more about my aunts and uncles' lives and my grandparents' lives than we ever knew as children. I knew that Uncle Larry had been in the war. I didn't know what he did. And I remember after he had passed, we were going through a box of family memorabilia that my uncle Jerry, the third child, yeah, I guess my father wasn't the middle child. He was the fourth. Had collected, and we found a collection of photographs, and there was one of Uncle Larry in an aviator's uniform standing next to a plane. And that was when I learned that he had been a bomber pilot. I had no idea. I knew his career was with something to do with aviation, and he lived in Washington, D.C. area, but I really didn't know anything about his history. My dad's story was personal to him, and this is what I remember about it. I hope this is accurate, but this is my memory of the story because my father was advanced in age when he told it to me, but he told me that he remembered his family being so proud of Larry being in the service and serving his country. But my dad's biggest memory of that time, in addition to, of course, waiting for letters home, was one night before Larry deployed. He had gone through military training somewhere in Indiana, I think. But one night, my dad, who was, I believe, 14 at the time, was in bed asleep, and he was woken up in the middle of the night by Larry, who told him that he was leaving, that he was being shipped out to go overseas, and he had come home late at night to say goodbye. And he woke my dad up, and he told him that he loved him, which was not something they commonly did. You know, they knew that brothers and sisters and mothers and children loved each other, but they didn't really say it. But his Uncle Larry, my Uncle Larry, obviously thought it was important to say goodbye to his entire family, not knowing what was going to happen. And my father said he would never, ever, ever forget that. He was so proud of his brother, and so sad and so scared. But the fact that his big brother came home, woke him up, and hugged him and said, "I love you," meant everything to him. I know through Jack Overfield's research more about what my uncle did during the war, and it wasn't until Jack shared this stuff with me that I learned about it. I'm very proud of who my Uncle Larry was. He was handsome too. When we got that box of pictures out and I saw a picture of him in his uniform, I was like, wow, he was really attractive. Looked great in uniform. And I always thought he was handsome. But he was, he was kind of aloof and older, and I didn't really get to know him. And one of the greatest regrets that I have as a senior citizen now myself is that we didn't share these stories earlier, because now I have so many questions about Larry, about his family, about my family, about my father, who served in Korea. And I wish that I could ask those questions now, and I can't. So I'm grateful for the research that Jack has done on my Uncle Larry, and I am very grateful for the story about Operation Chowhound, which I had never, ever heard anybody in the family talk about. Which, when I read the materials that Jack found and found out that my uncle was part of that humanitarian effort, and that was the thing that he was most proud of, that brought me to tears, and I'm getting a little teary just talking about it right now. So I'm very proud of my uncle, and I'm very proud of his service to our country. And I wish he was here so I could tell him so.